All right, friends. This week we are working on the concept of orthographic projections, okay? So you will be drafting two plates of like two separate sheets this week. One will be an example orthographic projection, which I will draft with you. And then the other will be an orthographic projection using the little block that I have sent to your home. You will measure and draft this block. And I'll give you more specific instructions about that when we get to it. But first, I just want to talk through the concept if you're not familiar with it so that you can be up to speed on that. Orthographic projections. This is chapter 7 in the book, which will be linked obviously above this video as usual. The concept of an orthographic projection is to take a three-dimensional object, right? Like this staircase, for example, or in our adventure, it'll be one of these little blocks, right? It's a three-dimensional object, and to create a set of plans that replicate its three-dimensional form using flat views, right? So it's the idea of there's a glass box, right, that you see on the slide, right? And so you are seeing what would this look like from each side of that box, okay? And so this is all, if you were to open up that box, this is what those views would look like, right? So you have your top, your front, the bottom view looking up from underneath, right? Right side, left side, and a rear view. You're also seeing the line type distinctions here, right? You're seeing these dashed lines. So a dashed line means it's something that we're seeing through a surface, whereas these solid lines are the visible line, right? So if I'm looking at this block, for example, right, you would see all of these lines from the top view. On the bottom view, you don't see any of those shapes, but you would draft a dashed line to indicate where behind this surface there are other dimensional shapes, okay? So that's why you're seeing on the bottom view here and on the back view of the staircase, those dashed lines to indicate that. Now, when we're drafting scenery, when we're drafting anything for the theater, and in most cases, you don't need all 6 views in order to replicate the object or to build the design, right? You really just need the 3, right? You really just need a top view, a front view, and a right side view. Those are your standard drawings, right? And then these are your dimension relationships, right? You have the width that lines up when you draft it with the width in the top view, right? And then the height lines up. The height in the front view is going to be the same as the height in the side view. And the depth in the side view is going to be the same as the depth in the top view. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So this is the way that we would lay out that plate typically when we're drawing it, okay? There are some examples right here of if this is your top view, any of these shapes could be drawn, right? Any of these three-dimensional forms could be within this top view, okay? And so what we would need in order to fully draft these different blocks, right, is we would need this side view, right, and the front view. We would need to see what this shape looks like from all of those different angles, okay? We'll talk about this a little bit. This is a cool trick, right, where you can use a 45-degree angle to transfer the lengths, the depth dimension, right, from a top view to the side view, and we'll do that together. You have an example of that in your printed handouts as well. So I will teach this process when I draft the first block with you. Here are conventions about using hidden lines, right? So this is more of that what you want to think about when you're using a dashed line to indicate that there's something behind, right, or through on the other side. So these are examples of how those hidden lines would play out. And you can read more about that in the book. All right. So let's get started on actually doing this. Okay, step 1, drawing preparation, right? We are drafting this block. He's so cute. But before we start, I am going to put down a new sheet of vellum. And before I even do that, I'm going to do a quick clean. I have like a little bit of Windex on this paper towel because I've noticed there was some smudging on my last project. And I want to just clean my triangles, right? You can see all of that grime coming off, right? In order to have a cleaner drawing. So that is my first step, is just going to be to make sure my tools are clean before I start. So clean tools. We're going to do the same thing we did before, right? Where we stick down the top corners, we pull down the sheet with our T-square, and we'll then stick down our bottom corners with drafting dots. Boom. There it is. So that is our sheet. Here we are. I'm gonna add some more light. Is that better? Ugh, I don't know. I wish I had a drafting light, you know. You don't know. You haven't drafted in person. Okay. So now let's locate the pictures, the content that I have for you. So for this one, we have this handout, and also you will be doing a title block, which is this handout. Okay. So let's talk about these two things real quick. We'll talk about this title block situation because it's part of your drawing preparation. And then we'll talk about this drafting, which is a drafting of this block. Okay? So let's start with the title block and how it works on a show. Title blocks. I have slides for this, y'all. It's a great thing. So title blocks and drawing setup, this is also in the book. It's on a slightly different page in one of the chapters we've already looked at. And this is an example of a title block. They contain standard information about the drawing, and they are always located either in that bottom left-hand corner or along the bottom edge of the plate. Or the far left edge of the plate, so that they are easy to find and identify in any drawing set. The title block contains the identifying information about this sheet of drafting, right? So everything from the name of the producing organization, the name of the production, the show title, right? In this case, it'll be the class title. If it's a specific act or scene, that will be included in this information, right? If it's a specific scenic unit or drawing sheet, then that title is included in the title block as well. It will include the drawing number or the sheet number or the plate number. Those are all interchangeable, but that's basically the page number in the drawing set. It will include the scale of the drawing. So what scale is this all drafted in? It will include when it was drafted, who drafted it, and that can be listed as a different person than the designer, because drafting is jobs for money that other people can do, like you in the future. So if the designer drafts it, then they'll say it was drawn by them, but otherwise you will have the specific drafter listed, their name listed separately. If you have a larger title block, like the full edge title block, you'll also see information like the phone number or email address or contact information for the designer. You'll get things like the disclaimer that we put on all of our drawings that as a designer, I'm not responsible for structural engineering. I'm responsible for the look and shape of the object, and the technical director or the shop is responsible for that structural engineering. And so there's a disclaimer that goes into my title blocks when I produce a drawing for a project. We also, in a lighting situation, right, your title block is where you would put the legend and key information. If there's a technical director assigned to the show, if there's a director of the show, that kind of stuff goes on there too. For this class, I have drawn up a simplified title block that you will use for all of our shows. And first here are a couple of other examples, right, of those kinds of title blocks, right, that are for different projects in different situations, right? You might see things, whatever different way, right? Here's a long edge, right? This would go down the whole left side of the drafting, and it gives you some more space for notes, revisions, information like that. And then here we are. For this class, this will be our standard title block for you. You have this in hard copy, which I showed you before I found the slides, which are better. And this is what we will place on the bottom right-hand corner. Yes. The bottom right-hand corner of each sheet of our drafting. And going forward, from here on out, we will plate everything with this title block. And I'll never say everything because sometimes I might be like, you know what, on this one, I don't need the whole title block. But for the most part, this is the project scale, right? You'll notice some things to keep in mind, right? The text is not the full height of the plate grid, right? So this is like a table and the text is centered inside of that table. The scales are intentional, right? So like name of the producing organization, that would be Cal Poly Pomona. It's in a 1/4 inch tall space, but the letters are less than a 1/4 inch tall, right? So when you lay out your title block, you can give yourself guides in addition to the lines of the title block, which you'll go back over in HB lead. You can give yourself some really light 4H guides so that your letters can be evenly centered within that height, okay? Do the same thing for the show title or the drawing title in this case, right? What the sheet title is, what the director, in this case, put my name for the director, put your name for the designer, and then the scale and date, and you will put those labels on those boxes. So it will look just like this and be repeated. I'm going to switch back to my camera view. So the thing you'll see is, here's my layout for my plate, okay? I have that nice 1/2 inch border that I've put in all the way around. This is all a super light lead because it's not my final version and I don't want to get smudgy HB lead all over everything. It's like a broken record that I keep saying that, but it's true. So something cool about drafting on vellum is, right? So in addition to, there's my nice sheet, right? I'm drafting on vellum now. If you want to, you can do something like cut out this picture from this piece of paper that I mailed to your house or whatever that you got, and you can use it as a guide to trace through the vellum sheet, okay? So I would just cut it off at this edge, right? Place it up underneath your drafting sheet and line up the bottom edge like that, and then you can just trace in those lines for the title block, okay? So that is a good trick to make this go a little faster for you, since you are going to do this every time. That's why we draft on vellum, right? Because it does allow us to place one sheet on top of the other and transfer information in that way. Great. So that's your drawing preparation, right? Do your sheet border, your 1/2 inch sheet border, all the way around your plate, just like we did before, and then put in the layout of the title block. Don't fill in that lettering until you're done with everything because that is the most apt to smudge because it's just that real soft HB lead. But layout of the sheet, great. Okay, Next thing is this orthographic projection thing we've been talking about. Now, we are talking about orthographic projection, okay? So that was the exploded box view, right? This is a three-dimensional object. What? It's a 3D thing. Wow, right? It has a front and a side and a top to it, okay? When we did this in class, we measured it in 1-inch scale and then drafted it in 1/2-inch scale, which is the drawing that you see here, the example drawing that you see here. So we're in 1/2-inch scale. The way that I suggest you start out, if you were handed a block, which you have been, you've been handed a block. Welcome. So the way I suggest you start out is by quickly sketching it on a piece of scratch paper from each view that you're going to look at, okay? So in this case, right, we start with the top view. Boom, the top view, right? And so we look for the lines that we would see looking straight down on the top of this block, right? So it's going to be a rectangle here for our slanted miter cut piece of 2x4. Then we see it's a rectangle here that looks like it's right next to it for this piece of 1x. And that whole thing is floating on top of this rectangle for the 2x4, okay? So the way that that is then drawn, you can see here, right? With the black lines, the heavy black lines, I have the biggest rectangle for this 2x4, and then I have the shape of the 1x and the 2x right there, okay? Next, after we've drafted that, we will draft the front view, okay? So we'll turn it in this direction. We'll get the additional measurements that we need, right, in order to draw this view right below that view we already have, okay? So we have our top view, and then we just roll straight down to draft our front view. Okay? So far, so good. Then we want to draft our side view, okay? And in order for it all to match up correctly, we turn our block this way, right? And we get that side view. So what I would start with, right, is figuring out what those measurements are for each of those sides. And I've given them to you. And I've only had to give you this side, that side, right? We actually don't need additional measurements in order to figure this out, right? Because these measurements here will match these vertical measurements there, right? The height will match here, okay? And I'm gonna walk through drafting this with you right now. So let's say we measured the top view, okay? With our scale rule. We've sketched it out, we've measured it. We're now going to draft this onto our sheet. So I'm a dummy, and I just talked through this whole thing, not recording. That was very silly of me. I'm gonna go back and do it again. So we started out here, right? We're looking at this top view. We've measured it. We have measurements for ourselves. It's great. So what we determined, right, was that the outside box, so that's generally where we start when we're drawing, right? We start by drawing the box that the drafting fits inside. So we drew that outside box first. We also gave ourselves a certain amount of space. So I created the bottom line of this rectangle, and I put it about 4 inches from the top of the page because I knew I needed another chunk of space down below for the front view. And I also need it to have a side view that fits and doesn't crash into my title block in the corner. So probably 3 inches from the top of the page would have been good, or 3.5. I'm trying to kind of center it without being too much of a crazy person. So I drew a rectangle that is 7 inches in half scale by 3 foot 5 inches in 1/2 inch scale. I'm a person who lives in a house with like a bunch of different scale rules, so I went and grabbed my baby one because it's a little bit easier to manipulate in the context of I don't have a lot of space. I have like cameras and things everywhere. So I've done that outside box. Then I went in and I used math. So if you notice, the focus is, there it is. If you notice, right, we have 3 foot 5 inches for this whole width. And then we have measurements for each of these sides, right? So we've measured this rectangle and this rectangle. We don't have measurements for this gap between the rectangle and the edge of the block. So I'm going to use math and assume it's centered. So I subtracted the 2 foot 6 from the 3 foot 5 in order to get 11 inches, which I then divided by 2. So now it's going to be 5.5 inches from the top, 5.5 inches from the bottom. That's going to give me this next inside rectangle. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to draw, right, is going to be this rectangle. And then I'll grab this last line at the end. So let's draw the rectangle. So I have a mark up here that's 5.5 inches from the top. I have a mark down here that is 5.5 inches from the bottom. And I'm going to give me that third line, 1 foot 6 right here in the center. Okay. Now I'll take my T-square. And I'll give myself where those will be. On that top edge, I will grab that measurement, which was 3 foot 3. Give myself a mark for that and erase past those lines. And because I'm coming back over this, well, I'm not, but you will be coming back over this with your heavier lead. If you don't perfectly line up all of these corners, that's okay because you're going to do it when you come back for your final pass with your HB. Okay, great. So now we have the top view. Next, we want to do the front view. Okay, so we have the top, we're switching to the front. So things that we know, all of these width-wise measurements will be the same from the top view to the front view, right? What that means for us is in order to draft the front view, we just need to know the height of each of these elements, right? We just need to know this height, this height, this height of each of these pieces in order to get that front view drafted, okay? We have that this is 3 foot 3 tall, this triangle. We have a 9-inch thickness for that in between step, and then 1 foot 6 for that bottom step, okay? So I know my total height. I'm gonna give myself a little space. I'm gonna go just above where my title block sits, right? So there's my title block. I'm gonna go just a little bit above that, okay? And that's where I'm gonna place the baseline for this piece, okay? I'm gonna just very lightly draft that in. Now, instead of measuring, because measuring is a pain, I'm going to just bring down the existing lines, right? So instead of measuring 7 foot 0 inches again, right? 3 foot 3 inches again, I'm just going to pull down the lines that we have in an existing way. And these are the red lines on the diagram that we have, okay? So if you notice, let me just zoom in, right? This is going to match up with this edge. This is going to match up with this edge right here, right? Makes sense. This line here is going to match up with the far edge. That is intentional, okay? And that is important in terms of how we lay out the drawing. So we will now transfer down all of those measurements very lightly using the initial drawing. We have the top view as our guide, okay? So I'm just going to bring this down, lining it up with each of these existing lines. And I kind of have an idea in my head of how tall I need. I'll have extra height, more than I need on this plate, and that's a good thing. So this, I don't need it to be as tall, right? I know it's only 1'6". Okay. So now I have these 3 lines. Now I can measure up this edge to give myself my next set of horizontal lines. Okay. So that I know is 1'6" is going to be the bottom step of this stepped piece. I also know this one doesn't need to continue all the way to the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and erase that now so that I don't forget to do it. Okay. So 1'6" from this bottom edge is going to be my first measurement. Let's grab that 1/2 inch scale, give myself a little mark at 1'6". Great. Take my T-square, pull that across, and I have 1'6". Great. Next one, 9 inches, no problem. Next one, 3'3". So I just need this top edge that's 3'3", this top corner. Wow, it's like I do this for my job. That's very close, okay? And now, instead of using my T-square, I can either use my, I know this is a 45-degree angle, right? Because of how triangles work. Because of this, if this side is 3'3" and that side is 3'3", then that means the diagonal will be a perfect 45-degree angle. So I can use a 45-degree angle if I want to on my T-square to connect that line. I can also just use it as a straight edge, use my triangle as a straight edge and line up the very end of that dot with that hash mark I just created in order to draft the miter, okay? Then I go in and I erase all of the extra stuff I don't really need. Right? I don't need all of this other business, right? Not really, okay? So now I have successfully transferred all of those lines from up here. Those came straight down, and then I've added in those height dimensions. Next step is going to be to draw this side view. This view, side, right? And in order to do it, there is a shortcut as demonstrated here. Right? And what that shortcut is to create a 45-degree angle from, if there's a box around the whole thing, right? So if you have this box around the whole thing, and you take a 45-degree angle off of that box, then any measurement from this side can be transferred over that 45-degree angle to the side view, right? Any of these measurements from the top view can be transferred over to the side view because they will all be the same, right? So if I know 3'5", 3'5" is here, right? I know 2'6", 2'6" is here. I know 1'6", 1'6" is there, okay? So we're gonna do that now. It is a good trick, we're going to do it. So, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring this horizontal line across, further across, right, in order to give me the base, the bottom line for my side view. So I'm gonna put my side view somewhere over here. All right, there's the landing spot for the side view. Great. Now I'm going to very lightly, because I will erase all of those guides, all of those construction lines later, but I'm going to very lightly encapsulate this in its box, right? So I'm going to I'm not even going to get close to the drawing. I'm just going to kind of very lightly give myself a little crosshairs where this corner would be. Okay. I can then go ahead and transfer across my horizontal lines, right? All of the horizontals. Now let's get those verticals. And the way we'll do it is across this miter edge. So I'm going to take my triangle, take a 45-degree angle. You can also do it this way, right? And line it up to that little cross that I made around the box, right? Then I'm going to draw this diagonal line. So there it is, diagonal line. So now what I do is, this is the magic trick, okay? I transfer these horizontal lines. They are going to become vertical lines by jumping and turning 90 degrees at this marker, right? So I'm gonna just pull them across, and you'll see in the drawing they go all the way across. I'm trying not to mess up my existing drawing, right? So I'm not gonna put any new lines that intersect with existing lines. I'm just gonna pull across. So I'm looking at this right now, and I want there to be more space before the side view. So the way that I do that is by moving this diagonal further out that way. We're gonna do that, right? Because I really want it to land above here. That's fine. So let's say I know kind of where I want it to be landing above. Then I can draw my 45-degree angle over there. Sorry guys, this is like me remembering what I want as I draw for you. Now we're gonna pull these measurements down to meet these bases, okay? So my first measurement matches up with this bottom line, okay? So that's the most outside edge of the base of the block. So I'm looking here at the block. I'm looking at this most outside edge first. Okay. The next hash mark, and what I'm doing, right, is I'm turning this corner. So the next one is going to be the 1 by little step. Okay. And then the next one, oh, and it's actually going all the way up, right? Because it has the 2 by 4 sitting on top of it right here. So we'll go all the way up to that top edge with this step. Okay, yeah? The next one is the other edge of the 2 by 4, so it'll stop here above the 1 by, right? And then I'll transfer the other side of the 1 by and the other edge of the base 2 by 4. Okay, do we see how I did that? So I'm taking each of these, bringing them down, and now I magically have exactly these measurements transferred over into the side view. And I can erase all of my outside lines, do some drawing labels and dimensions, and that's the ball game, okay? So, drawing labels, right? I just want top, front, and side to be marked underneath each of these, and then let's do dimensions just because this is an online class and I can't measure your actual thing, okay? So, some things about dimensions that we see here, right? If there is a measurement that's inside of another measurement, your smallest dimensions go closest to the object and then you step your way out, right? So this 3'3" is closer to the object lines and then the 7 feet is on the outside, right? And that's because you don't want to crisscross your dimension lines, right? You don't want to have to pull this 3'3" line up past that 7 because then you get that intersection and that's not what we would like to see. Yes, and then you'll just use the same strategy you used to do your dimensions on the line project that we did a couple weeks ago. So then I also would like a drawing label for each one, and that can be as simple as giving yourself a little line below as a guide, right? A little set of lines, and then This just wants to say top, 1 in a circle, 2 in a circle, front, 3 in a circle, side. And you'll draw your lettering better than me. And then you'll fill in your title block with all of the title block information. Drawing labels, dimensions, title block. There it is. Now it's sharp. Okay? Does that all make sense? Great. So you'll do that for the example. Then you'll do it again for the model that I gave you, right? So let's talk through that real quick, right? I'm gonna have you measure this block in 1/2 inch scale and draft it full size, right? So you'll draft it in 1/2 inch scale as well. So you will have a top view, you'll have a front view, and then you'll have a side view, okay? Those are your 3 views in your orthographic projection of this tiny block. And I look forward to seeing your assignments, right? So 2 plates. This one will be sheet 1. This one will be sheet 2. Great. Let me know if you have any questions about this. I know it's a lot, and I will talk to all y'all soon. Thanks. Bye, friends.